No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Well, we're just... Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, my name is Yvette, and we are going to have Julian joining us from the bridge because he's doing day one, Lead for Leaders.
As is Steve.
So, as is Steve. Oh, Steve's there as well. And I saw Simon Ryan Fuller walking down towards the bridge this morning, so I think he might be. I don't know who else is.
It'd be interesting to see how confused they all look then. First day is really confusing.
We may or may not see their faces, but they will see ours. So we've got 3 report outs, all updates this week. So it's really good actually to see all, well, 3 of the 5 value streams reporting out on progress together. I think last week we had an RPIW. So for acute medicine, it feels like things are flowing quite a lot, and there's probably quite a lot going on there. I think at Chapel Allerton you've been going for so long now that you have your old hands at this, but you've had a massive interruption to the work that you were doing because of the winter. Hello, Julian. Hi, hello. We're all gathered, so we were just waiting for you to arrive, and we're
Sorry, I'm down at the bridge doing Lead for Leaders, so apologies for not being with you personally.
That's yeah, that's great. So it's going to be really good to hear the and urology. Your old hands at this now. You've been going now for quite a while. So I think David, you're going to kick us off.
Yeah, just me.
And report out at 60 days on the scheduling that you've been looking at for urology procedures. Again, you've had quite a lot of interruptions due to winter pressures, but we did lock down a list, I remember, and I think we might hear about if that list happened.
Yeah.
So, over to you.
Good afternoon, my name is David Golding, Business Manager for Urology and Joint Process Owner of this RPIW. So it's 60-day report out regarding scheduling of routine urology inpatients. So just to recap, the RPIW was about how urology schedule their routine inpatients. At the time of the RPIW, our routine patients roughly waited about 17 weeks from hitting the waiting list to getting a TCI date. A lot of this waiting time was then due to the production of the urology rota, which has, I'm sure, been talked about a lot within urology and trust level as well. Everybody seems to know quite a lot about it. And 60% of our urology cancellations were related to scheduling. So the RPIW and our target progress report at the time of the RPIW, our lead time for getting creating lists and contacting patients, it took us 29 days to create this data list due to the urology rota, which was 704 hours, and our target to get to where we want to be is to get this what they call a rolling rota, so that it's live all the time. Currently we're always waiting for this rota, so hopefully by the end of 90 days or 120 days we could be having we could be at 7 days for this production of the urology rota. On the 30-day report out, we were unable to measure the lead time due to the lateness of the rota coming out. So I'm pleased to report on 60 days we've had a massive increase, as you'll be able to see up there. The target progress report is a sea of green, which I'm quite happy about, really. So it took 16 days for the urology rota to come out this time from our first preliminary rota, which is like a massive improvement for ourselves. Still a lot of work to go around creating this rota. Our working process, we've currently got 171 routine inpatients on our waiting list, so it has dropped slightly since the last report out. Just looking at some of the other figures, the last report out, only one patient was given six weeks notice, but I think all five this time for the March rota, for the March protected list, all got that 6 weeks notice. So for improvements there. The theatre lockdown schedule, we're still only managing to lock the one list down, which is what we're calling the protected list, 6 weeks in front. Again, that list for April has been locked down for 6 weeks in front. Now all the patients have been contacted. Patient cancellations in February due to scheduling was 11 patients were cancelled due to scheduling, which out of 134 operations is again a massive improvement, considering that there was 60% of our patients were being cancelled due to scheduling at the start of the RPIW. And the 5S, unfortunately, we're still only at level 1. We're still not meeting a number of the targets on the 5S, which I'll explain later. We've still got major work to do there. So moving into the newspaper, we've started to we've got the team agreement now with the consultants about which is going to be our protected or routine only patient list. So we've got that team agreement, that's documented and down on our production board in the Paul Sykes Centre. We've got standard work as well for creating these lists. That's all documented on the official paperwork, so we've got that, but there's still other work to do regarding where we are storing the urology rota. It's still not implemented and stored for all to view on the G drive, so we're still looking at trying to resolve that issue. So in the last 60 days, what have we achieved? So the 9th of March protected routine list went ahead. 3 out of 5 patients originally listed from the RPIW were treated. Our next routine list is on the 20th of April. It's booked and locked down. Our April rota was released on the 16th of March. And we've also removed all paper pre-assessment booking forms from the Paul Sykes area in our attempt to go paper light. So on our production board in the Paul Sykes Centre, we've got our team agreement there and our RPIW scheduling notice. So that's for all to see, and you won't be able to see on there, but there's a number of steps on there for the consultants to adhere to. As I said earlier, we're still not achieving, we've not moved up to level 2 on our 5S. The main issue is that we're not storing the rota on the G drive where we need it to be. There's a number of members of staff that have access to the rota in order to make any changes, but then everybody else should just have read-only access, so they can just view the rota, but it's not there, it's being stored individually, which was not part of the agreement on the RPIW. So the challenges that we've faced have been getting routine operations to take place given the current bed pressures. We're still challenged with creating a 6-week rolling rota for the teams to be able to book into and give the patients sufficient notice and acceptance to store the rolling rota on the G drive. So the key learnings that we've learned in the last 60 days, we need to ensure that we're ringing patients 10 days before their TCI to remind them to stop any medication. Because 2 of the cancellations, I believe, from our protected list were due to them not stopping their medication. still have further work to do regarding team behaviours and the importance of what this RPIW was set out to achieve. Less of our theatre lists are actually changing, as in the patient order or the type of patient that is being listed once the lockdown. And finally, just a bit of a shameless plug for the new AMS Twitter account. Follow our progress on there for, over the next 30 days. Thank you very much.
Stay where you are, then. Stay where you are. I think you've got other team members here in the audience, haven't you? We've certainly got Abby and I remember your team from Report Out. And I guess, would anybody else from the RPIW team like to make a comment? No? Go on then, Abby.
I think, honestly, probably as frontline staff, especially on this RPIW, it's a massive thanks to management to at least allow us to have those theatre lists locked down. And like Dave has just said, out of those 5 patients, 3 were treated, only 2 were cancelled because they forgot to stop their medication and being elderly. And the rota being out sooner now is giving us enough time at the moment to really ring patients or even just send the letters and patients just respond. We've got an online system where they can go online to confirm that they've received the letters, and it's taken a lot of calls out of us, ringing patients. So thanks to Dave.
That's lovely to hear, and it's lovely to hear that actually, you know, life has got a bit easier and has improved, despite the fact that you haven't actually achieved all of the things that you wanted to achieve from the RPIW. And I guess what I'm picking up is that the engagement of the urology consultants, and how do we get that? I mean, I'll just declare an interest in that. I don't find the G Drive easy to access myself, and therefore I wonder whether the G Drive might be the only thing that you can universally give access to, but is that the right?
I think it's more the fact that we just need to store it there, because currently it's being saved to a laptop or someone's personal drive, which is fine, but then if they're not in, then nobody has a view of the rota really.
Stuart and then Tim.
The upper GI surgeons save theirs on a Google Drive, which allows everybody to access it as and when they need to, and you can limit access to read and write, and it means that people are able to access it on their phones in terms of seeing what they're doing when they're doing it. Is this a different type of G Drive, where G means Google rather than the trust?
No, it's just
you know, I'm just saying, is that
you know what Stuart suggested
is that what we should be using?
Yeah.
Because that seems to work fairly well. They all accept it and they can control who accesses it.
Maybe that's something you can take back and discuss with them, Tim.
So a question on a slightly unrelated
issue.
So the issue of, you know, we realise now that we need to confirm with patients 10 days in advance. We've seen in different work that confirming patients 2 or 3 days in advance reduces the risk of cancellations or patients not telling us that they've got a cold or something else that might stop them happening. Are we looking to confirm patients, to ring patients to confirm those 2 different items, so making 2 calls, or are we looking at measuring what's best, and will the benefits that we gain save the time that's required to do those repeated telephone calls?
I think
they do get a text message 2 days before the TCI as well, so they do get a text to remind them, and that does sometimes, they'll ring up and say, I've had my reminder but I'm not well, or so that text reminder has helped a little bit.
And has that got that text in about, let us know if you're unwell, or?
I don't know, it just reminds them of their appointment, and that tends to get them to ring and say, I'm not well, I won't be coming in. So that has made a difference, as well as the text reminder service.
Is there any learning from Chapel Allerton about that?
We do a 7-day phone call So we pick up an awful lot at 7 days, and then there's a 3-day phone call as well for your joints and the more likely to cancel type patients. Not everyone gets that, and that seems to have worked really well for picking up issues of drugs not being stopped and things like that. But it doesn't change the fact that if it means that somebody can't come because they've got a cold or they've not stopped their blood thinners, you can't always fill that gap anyway, so it's a double-edged sword really.
Sorry, do you mind if I just...
No, keep going.
Was that decision about who gets the 2 or 3 day phone call just done purely on where you've got the higher cancellation DNA rates?
Do you know what, I can't give you a definite answer on that, because if I go back to Anne, she'll probably say that everyone gets it. But I think one of the issues with the phone call is the phone call is really great and it's really consistent that it happens, but if you don't get in touch with the patient the first phone call, it doesn't necessarily trigger another phone call, which is something they're working on.
Gillian, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of expand a bit on the 10 days. It's purely, we went for the 10 days because a lot of them are on a specific medication where it's usually 10 days. So if we can catch them on the 10 days and just remind them, then they can still come in. Whereas if we reduce it to 7, we're already out of date. You know, we've already... Is that warfarin then? Clopidogrel. So if it's 10 days for clopidogrel and we're not ringing them until 7 or 6 or 5, then we can't stop them. You know, it's already too late. Yeah. You know, for them to come in and have, and then it's. And then
how many days is it for warfarin?
It can be 5.
5 or 7.
Yeah, warfarin's a bit easier than some of the antiplatelet drugs, isn't it? Because at least 7 days.
So that's why we went for 10.
It's alright, it lost connection. Okay. So that's it just shows, doesn't it, how complex it is and how you really need quite an individual approach for each patient.
Yeah.
So
it's not just straightforward.
No.
But it'll also be different to each speciality you're in, because some procedures you can proceed with clopidogrel on board. So I think it's going to be a case of, if you're trying to share your lessons, it's each individual surgical speciality is going to have to come up with their own sort of rules of engagement.
Right. So presumably something like Urolift, it wouldn't make so much difference, but TURP, it would make
a big, obviously, then it does.
It has to be stopped.
Yeah. Complex stuff. Right, okay. But well done, and I mean, it's fabulous to hear the progress that you've made so far. It's great that the list went ahead, and it just shows that even when you've got the best made plans, sometimes the patients, it just doesn't always work, does it? But so the 20th of April, sorry, the 20th of April. Fingers crossed for that one then. Okay, fantastic. And David, I was one of your first followers on ALS, and I tweeted whilst you were speaking, and I included you in. Okay, brilliant. Right, thank you very much. So now, Val and Ben on Theatre Ready.
Oh yeah.
I'll give it a clicker.
Right, so hi, my name's Val. I'm team leader for Chapel Allerton Theatres and process owner for this RPIW.
And I'm Ben, I'm one of the consultant anaesthetists, and I'm part of the team that have been involved with this RPIW.
So this is our project form. The RPIW was titled Theatre Ready, which includes a time taken from patient leaving theatre to patient being to theatre being ready to accept the next patient. So there was lots of variations in our workings, which meant that there was often a large amount of time in between patient turnaround. Lots of different opinions on best practice, and lots of just lots of challenges really about standardising that. And this is our target progress report. lead time originally in the first baseline measures was 14 minutes. The target was 10 minutes, and we're consistently getting an average of 7 minutes now. Staff walking distance is 140 steps, so has remained around the same for between 30 and 60 days, but it's still a positive change. Quality defects, so we were measuring with this, we were measuring loan kit, which wasn't actually part of the RPIW, but was a really important metric to have, because that caused us to be really quite slow in checking of kit. So we've done a lot of work with GIRF, dovetailing with this RPIW, and we've now had that at 5.4% because we've started doing our more inpatient working again, and so therefore we've had more complex revisions that have come through that just, we haven't really had the whole thinking about spreading that out. We're just desperately trying to get our patients that are long waiters and clinically urgent done. And then the environmental health and safety 5S metric was based on our standardising our sluice rooms, which is a really important area that provides all of the tools that we need to create an effective turnaround. And that's sitting at a level 3 at the minute, which I'm really pleased about. And we've recently had a 100% cleaning audit result, which would support that too. So that I'm really pleased with that, actually.
Okay, so this is some more of the practical changes that we've made in the workplace. One of the key things that we identified was communication barriers between theatre and the ward area where they prepare the patients. And now we've introduced these, the golden phone call concept, whereby estimated duration of the surgical procedures is made and documented on the operating list itself, which is where the stars are on the right-hand side. This information is then, when you send for your first patient of the day, we inform the ward of any changes to the theatre list order. We give them an estimated time at which we'll be sending for the patient, and this also allows the wards to be giving food and water to the patients if they're going to be further on in the day, which is part of the Trust in Drink campaign. This is quite a nice little thing. This is something that our team came up with. This sort of shows some engagement with the staff involved. The ward staff have now done this off their own back, and they include whether they've received a golden phone call, which shows they seem to value its importance and are really keen to make sure this process is taking place. Another thing we identified was it's quite a small time period that we're measuring, and the accuracy of data was really quite important. This is quite a low-tech, low-cost solution whereby some whiteboards in the anaesthetic room have been modified where we can document the time the patient's sent for and the time they actually arrive in the anaesthetic room. This is a little bit of soft psychology, I would describe it. It means that people are aware that this time factor is being measured. It allows the accuracy of the data to be clarified, but also it sort of adds in a little bit of competition, and by the end of the day they're like, oh, how long has it taken us? How long has it taken us? Have we beaten our last turnaround? And they seem to, the staff seem to see it as something they can challenge their own practices to see if they can get any quicker, which is quite nice. We've introduced some, the Kanban card concept, so there was some anaesthetic pieces of equipment that if they weren't available could slow down transfer of the patient out of theatre, and these are now present in every theatre and ensures that oxygen cylinders and breathing circuits are now always readily available. And we've also done some work on standardising the workflow as skin closure commences to make it into a sort of standard work, and this is again displayed in every theatre, so the team know what's expected of them. And that links into this sort of standard work document that we put together during the first first week. Do you want to talk about the 5S?
Yeah, so the 5S seems to have been really successful this time, actually. Potentially, probably, because we picked something really quite small to do rather than something massive. Once bitten, twice shy. And it's there was buy-in to this quite quickly because it was something really basic and something really easy to consistently achieve. So I'm hoping that when we stand here at 90 days that we are at level 4 for this 5S. So on the newspaper there's still, I haven't done nice little round green things, which I probably will do for the next one because it looks a lot better. But we've got a large amount of standard work written. We're taking some feedback on that at the minute, and it will be finalised between 60 and 90. Let me just put it again. Oh, hold on, put it back. Is that all that I've got on my newspaper? I think I've probably got a bit more than that. There was just one slide, but we have introduced pages for the non-clinical support workers that are in trial at the minute, because one of the issues that was discussed in the week, really, wasn't it, that they could be off in the storeroom or dealing with someone at the door and not being able to find them to come in and help when it was time to clean round. So they are now carrying a pager so that they can come straight to theatre without that including someone coming out to find them. So that was one of the things. What else have we introduced recently?
Well, is the pager concept, and then there was also taking a bit of feedback on the standard work that we put together,
yes.
whether it needs modifying slightly.
So
watch this space.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep the team engaged, to listen to their feedback, and there's been some tweaking may be required to standard work that we put together, because they're finding that some people still have excess work to do and some people are underutilised, so hopefully we can get that polished and finalised by the time our next report's out.
And then challenges that we faced, again with the same with urology, the winter pressures, meaning that we weren't working as normally, and then when we were working as normally it was just a bit, it's been a really interesting time of feeling like it was very difficult to measure, because often I was measuring on a day that there was only one list, and so there was plenty of people, so of course the turnaround was only going to be 4 minutes. So it was really good to get a measurement, a consistent measurement twice of 7 minutes in normal working, because it does show that we have improved working normally, really. And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any questions for Val and Ben?
I'm a bit biased because I was the workshop lead for RPIW, and I'll put that out there, but it's just a well done. KPO wise, we've not really been there with this team after the event, partly because they've been so good about getting on with this stuff, and I think mine's just a thank you and well done. There's some fantastic stuff in there. It's really great to hear.
Thank you. No, that's well said, Jimmy. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got any questions?
I just wondered how the staff had taken to the Think Drink stuff. I know you
started
amazing,
with that
Penny. I've worked at Chop Mountain.
It's been absolutely brilliant, and I was really, really nervous about it coming in right around the time of an RPIW, because it's an awful lot to throw at it, but it's completely dovetailed, because the golden phone call was part of the RPIW, which has worked perfect for the Think Drink, and the Think Drink team have been fabulous too. But I think the average now at the minute is sitting at about 2.5 hours. Yeah, and we've had to change a few things, haven't we? We very nearly gave a patient a drink, and then a kit was dirty, and so we had to change the order. So we're
how
kind
does
of
that work when there's a list change?
So what we're doing now is we don't confirm the drink for the next patient until the previous patient is in the anaesthetic room and is definitely getting their anaesthetic, whereas before we were kind of running with it. But the communication between the ward and theatres is absolutely paramount to both, to this piece of work and that piece of work, so it's all kind of really going hand in hand. It's really nice, actually. So yeah, good.
So apart from the timeliness for the patients, what has been the impact of reducing your turnaround time on the theatre teams, but you know, both the scrub teams and the anaesthetic surgical teams?
I think it allows, if you're being more efficient, it means that you're more likely to finish your working day on time. People are more likely to be able to get things like breaks, and that's probably the where you get the buy-in from the staff, that they can see that if they're more efficient, that they're not going to risk being overrunning and being there late and things like that. One of the lists that we had the other week, which I was involved with, was a big discussion about whether the list was overbooked and talking about removing patients from the list. And actually, we managed to do all the work that was planned ahead of schedule, and I think it is only saving 7 or 8 minutes here and there, but over a day that adds up to quite a lot of time. So.
Yeah. And just the energy of a fluid day. I think if you've got a really clunky day where there's breaks in between, then it does naturally slow you down. It's a bit like I really struggle with audit mornings, because it's by the time you start your list, everyone's like, oh, we're finally starting our list at 1:30. And it's the same kind of concept. If you've got big breaks, then people just kind of naturally slow down. And there certainly seems to be a lot more energy within the department as a result of this.
Yeah. And certainly that's one of the things that Virginia Mason said got them the buy-in, was actually seeing people, you know, actually less stressed at the end of the day because the day had gone more smoothly, and going home on time. And that helped to really get the buy-in. So that's fantastic. Any other questions for the team?
I was going to ask you, your target's at 10 minutes, isn't it? If you're consistently getting 7.5 minutes, when do you reduce that to 5?
So we did actually have this conversation, because we probably could for scopes.
Really?
But you couldn't for a revision. There's just too many trays. So not that I've just said can't in a needs and print. I'm going to wash my mouth out when I leave. But perhaps looking at maybe like doing your specialities differently. So your soft tissue knee having a separate turnaround to your complex revision work, maybe. It's something to look at in the future.
I'm really joking.
Right, okay.
So that target's 48 seconds under national target, so that was why it was in there, because currently before we were running it over national standards, that's bringing it under national standards. So, but it's a good question if it's consistent.
But I think there's something about having something that you can consistently measure yourself on and be good at consistently, and get home on time, or get the list finished on time. I think that's a real good motivator for people, rather than constantly saying something that you may not achieve half the time. So,
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. So now, Charlie and Graham from Value Stream 5, and this is about ward rounds in acute and elderly medicine.
Right, well, good afternoon, I'm Charlie.
90 days, sorry, I should have said.
So I'm Charlie, I'm a consultant in elderly medicine, so I'm a process owner for this RPIW.
And I'm Graham Sutton, also an elderly medicine consultant, and I was the sponsor of this RPIW.
So pre-RPIW, pre-value stream, the current state, when it was looked at, you can see that when the patient arrives up on the acute floor, of which there are 4 wards with about 30 patients on each, it was relatively short space of time before they have the oxygen swabs from the nurse. Then the patient would wait for about 3 hours and 40 minutes to see the junior doctor, and then there was a very long wait of 18 hours to see the consultant. And of course, this value stream is about the 14-hour consultant review target. So the future state, we were looking at maybe bringing the consultant review much earlier in the patient's journey, so that we can be involved in the meet and greet and having standardising these areas and removing the waste that we were seeing. And this RPIW was focused specifically on the ward round, and as you will remember from the previous report out, we looked at 4 different strands for this area, which was the handover to make this as lean as possible, and to divide the acute floor handover into one central one and one local one in each ward area. Then we were looking at how to maximise setting the ward round up. So the idea of this was so that everybody was organised, that everybody knew which patients they were seeing, with the view to reduce the lead time. Then we looked at developing ward round pro forma, and this was about improving metrics and improving quality. And then we looked at evening ward rounds. So during this period, we now have new job plans for the geriatricians. We're going to be delivering evening ward rounds from the beginning of April. And we saw that this was the area that we improved the 14-hour consultant review time. And so just to recap, pre-value stream, what would happen was at 9 o'clock, all of the trainees from all ward areas would all go and pile into this seminar room up on the top floor. And there was a lot of repetition of information, and people were talking about patients that most of the doctors up there wouldn't actually come across, so there was little or no benefit to some of that information that was being imparted there. So the current status, we've stripped down the central handover to the people that actually need to be there. So we've got a consultant geriatrician, a consultant acute physician, we have the on-call doctors, so the on-call registrars, the nights registrar, so that we can have a view of those sick patients coming into the acute floor or those that have gone up to critical care. And then with the local handovers, this has nursing involvement central to it. We've got a safety huddle sort of in that handover. And the good thing about this is that you can actually tailor the staffing you've got to the areas where we're busy. So that's probably one of the greatest positive impact that this RPIW has had. And just to show you just the mechanics of it, this is the handover pro forma, which is present on all 4 ward areas, and it's got so the trainees know which consultant they've got in the morning, and if there's a problem in the afternoon, they know who to contact. And we've got the night's doctor support doctor, and we also, which touches on the previous RPIW, we were allocating patients to specific trainee doctors so people knew who they were seeing, and also the nurses know who to interrupt, so to reduce interruptions. And then, of course, we had the unwell patients and urgent jobs that needed to be done. So we had, on the other side of this, we've got the standard worksheet there. So we've got the pro formas, as I've mentioned previously, in the same positions on the wards, in the same boxes. And we've also got the visible consultant rota, so people know who are turning up, and the pro forma, the ward round pro forma gets stapled in the booklets, which looks like this. I won't spend too much time on this, but the idea of this was just to have a prompt to look at metrics. So it's, and we know that it has, when it's used, it works really well. So we've seen a much better oxygen prescription rates, and well, now things have changed, so everybody requires MRSA eradication therapy at 65. So that's a new thing that's come in during this period. Over to Graham.
So this is our progress report. I think, as you can see from the top, the actual kind of the length of time that our ward rounds have taken have in fact gone up since the original RPIW. And I think that's mainly the difference from November to now, and equal since February, is that the acute floor ward round teams have had outliers. J24 opened, it's now closed this week, so I think if we were to measure it in the next sort of week or so, one would hope it would be sort of closer to the target. There has been some improvement in the 14-hour target, even amongst the elderly medicine one, as you can see from line 5. And I think that's partly because of, with the ward round set up, those sort of, you can actually kind of work out when people have come onto the ward who should, how do you capture those ones as early as possible. But as Charlie said, I certainly hope that come the next audit at the end of April, that number would go down quite considerably, especially for elderly medicine. I think we've seen from the quality defects with the pro forma consistently, we've seen improvement with regards to the VTE status being updated on PPM, oxygen prescription, and also whether or not cannulas are coming out. So it's hard to say whether or not that will have a huge impact on MRSA and MSSA bacteremias, because obviously we're only looking at 4 wards within ESM, but it's certainly a start. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get any trainee feedback for the way that this ward round works for this report out. And I think that, as Charlie mentioned, I think the biggest impact that I think virtually any of the medical teams, whether or not you're an FY1 through to consultant, it has been that the handover, as you can see there, it was taking sort of 21 minutes, and we're now kind of consistently between sort of 5 and 8 minutes, which is increasing our doctor time on the ward, so that is certainly helping when things do get tough on the acute floor. But I think the things that we've really noticed is when you've got the RPIWs, and I know this is kind of like telling people how to suck eggs, when the clinical teams are busy to try and actually continue collecting this data has proved a challenge, and so although our data is accurate, it has been incomplete. And I think when things are, when the pressure is high, when the number of outliers, when there's people in DED waiting for beds, people do fall back on workarounds, whether that's not using the Proform or doing something a little bit different. And I think this has led the two of us and Adam, who was also involved but he's now left to work for the CCG, to wonder whether or not we actually change our admission booklets to actually just be the admission. So that means that the VTE assessment that's in there is completely gone, so it's really forcing people to go use PPM, and then people would have the option of a continuation sheet or a ward round sheet. Because I think there is some thought that although the consultants should be using the ward round proformas, so should the trainees, because things like checking the MRSA swabs, oxygen prescription, it is for all the doctors to look at, not just the consultants. As Yvette alluded to, last sort of 2 weeks ago we had our third RPIW on J27, and they've been trying a different way of ward round setup, so how that will sort of continue, what we will have to wait and see. And as I mentioned earlier, I think having the extra patients on other wards has affected our ward round time. So thank you.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's quite hard work, isn't it, this? And it's hard to keep it going. And trying to do the work across 4 wards as well, quite a challenge. It does get me into, though, when we found something that works and when it improves something for patients, how do we get to the stage where we no longer allow people to choose to do something the way they like to do it rather than the way we've proved makes it better for the patients? And I think that's probably a challenge for all of us, isn't it? You know, that's come out through urology, and so we have to understand what it is that makes it people not go to the G drive, and I've admitted myself that I think it might be a bit difficult. We've got Chapel Allerton, the perhaps not resistance from the consultants, but you know, hearing the complexity of the patients and what can go wrong when you've opened the tray and found something that you can't put right. And then obviously for you guys, there are so many staff, so many different, your teams are hardly ever the same 2 days on the trot, aren't they?
No, that's true, and I think it is trying to embed really, because we now have our trainees are usually with us for 4 or 5 days, so it's a new team on the Monday, and some are there till the Friday, but there are a couple of level of trainees who turn up on the Friday, and I think it is mainly trying to not only add to the ward round setup, but have a sort of an induction of how it works each time, because I think from my Lean for Leaders work on sort of even just 5S'ing the doctor's room on J28, trying to maintain that is very hard when I'm not there and you've got the turnover of staff. So I don't think it's impossible, but again, it's trying to kind of just put in those, even if it's a very brief handover, and as people come through, and hopefully again with the student doctors come through, they spend time with us, you know, that kind of spreads on every single ward.
Okay, well, I mean, so are there any questions for Graham and Charlie, or comments?
Just one. So, the boys, I'm a proud mother of the boys, even though they're not mine and they're not boys. So I want to thank you for all your work, because I know it's been a really difficult winter for all the workforce on the acute floor, and it's really difficult to sustain that drive and momentum. And I think certainly the rapid improvement weeks, there's lots of energy, but then actually sustaining it and collecting the information and moving forward and making sure that we're continuing to look at our opportunities is a challenge for us all. Do you think there's been some impact in terms of the frailty unit, so that the patients that, and so we know that our admissions have gone down in elderly over the winter period, which I know sounds bizarre because we've got more elderly patients in beds, but do you think that the complexity's increased and that's had an impact on the ward round times too? Because we've got a frailty unit and we've got less admissions, even though we've got more attendances.
Well, I think yes, I think that's true. I mean, even just thinking of my ward round this morning, virtually all the patients that I saw were very unwell, very frail. You're having conversations with relatives who are there on the ward. So the actual ward round time was probably longer than ideally it should be. And I think we are, with the frailty unit, we are turning around. You know, it may appear to be small numbers, but I think it's a significant number. So again, as you say, the average, the average complexity on the acute floor, especially, well, and I think that's true with the people that the acute medical team are turning around in JAMA. So we are sort of left with sicker, more frail patients who are more complex, and they do take more time.
But still made improvements.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think if I could just implore you to, that first week in April, to really make us get to the 90% 14-hour standard, because I think if we can make it, we might not have to do the audit again. So, never a better incentive. But obviously, I think that will be interesting, won't it, to see what's the impact of that. It's certainly going to improve your patients seen within 14 hours by a consultant. Question mark, does it then change practice or does it improve flow? We don't know the answers to those yet. But
no, but I think we're also hoping that that will also give more opportunities to give feedback to trainees, because I think at the moment the amount of time that, because of our shifts for the trainees of the twilight shift, those trainees are seeing a lot of our patients, but they don't see a consultant because of the time. So with more overlap, you would hope better training, better feedback from the trainees would be one of the outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that will be the case. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That's been a really good report out. I think Julian's been beaming in and out. I don't know whether the signal's been lost at times. Julian, did you want to say anything, or?
Yeah, I did hear and see the vast majority of that, so really well done to all of the teams that reported out. In fact, many of us down here on this Lead for Leaders cohort have been watching the report out, so many others have been seeing the great work that's going on. We've been having a discussion down here about regardless value. So it's great to see the relevance and impact of all the work that all three have been doing. So really good work, and keep at it. It's making a big difference.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Julian. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everybody. I think you probably, all those teams are going to be reporting out again in another 30 days. Is that right?
Our colleagues for the
most recent.
Right, okay. But be interesting to see if we can get you all again on the same day, how things have progressed. Because I think sometimes the progress on the actual RPIW measures, some shift a lot, some don't shift a huge amount, but certainly I know from working with urology as the exec sponsor for that value stream, that a huge amount of change has happened in urology. Perhaps some of it would have happened anyway, but I think that the RPIWs have driven a very large amount of it, and the people who have done Lean for Leaders as well. So you, as you said, Charlie, those introductions at the beginning, there's a huge amount of learning that doesn't necessarily always translate into the measures that you do. So, but well done, everybody. Thank you. Give you I was just
I'd have to go. I've left me.
You're